Hey there, listeners. Ever get that feeling like you're looking at the world through a lens you didn't pick out? Like there's all these assumptions and beliefs kind of just riding along with you,
Oh, yeah.
unnoticed. That's what we're going deep on today, right here. Carl Jung's idea of the cultural unconscious.
Yeah, it's wild, like a whole mental library
Mm.
that we all kind of get handed just by being part of, well, any group, really.
Right,
It
right.
goes deeper than just the collective unconscious, the one Jung is, super famous for.
Yeah.
That one's more like the universal stuff, the archetypes,
Mhm.
cultural unconscious. This is about how those big archetypes get a local flavor.
Yeah. So not just the hero, like in general, but is that hero, say, a cowboy bucking the system or a samurai all about duty?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it. Take the American, the self-made man ideal, you know?
Mhm.
It's in so many of our stories, shapes how we think.
Oh, totally.
Can be inspiring, sure, but it also kind of makes it hard to talk about, well, stuff like systemic inequality. That myth, it's tucked into our cultural unconscious.
Right.
It's subtle, but it shapes how we see success, responsibility, all that.
Okay, so this cultural stuff, where does it all come from? Like, how does it get imprinted on us?
Well, it's like a tapestry. Lots of threads,
Yeah.
right? Myth and folklore, those are big ones. Think Greek myths, still popping up in movies today.
Makes you wonder.
Maybe we're not worshiping Zeus these days, but those ideas, powerful gods, these huge struggles, they resonate.
Like those stories are still echoing in our minds, even if it's been a while since we cracked open the Odyssey, right?
Exactly, yeah. And it's not just myths. Religion, even if you're not practicing, it leaves a mark. Take Christian imagery. So widespread in Western culture, you just, boom, recognize it instantly. Then
Yeah.
you got history.
Right.
The big events, especially the ones with, trauma or huge victories, those get imprinted on a whole group, like their psyche.
Like how World War II, it's still this like touchstone, right, for so many cultural conversations, even for people born way after.
Yeah, that's it. Can't forget art and literature either.
Right, right.
They're like cultural carriers, transmitting these symbols and emotions that, well, they hit deep within a certain group. Think about how, I don't know, certain songs can make people feel that national pride, even if the lyrics aren't like overtly patriotic.
Yeah, it's like this musical shortcut to a shared feeling.
Precisely. Shared experiences passing down through generations, that's what forms the cultural unconscious. It's a source of belonging, but also sometimes a source of conflict.
Conflict. How so?
Well, see, it gives us this shared identity, belonging, right? But it can lead to clashes when those values, the really deep down ones, they bump into different cultural, frameworks.
So it's like having a backpack that's perfect for your terrain, and then you go to a new landscape, and suddenly it's like weighing you down.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And with the world getting more global, right? Cultures are mixing all the time, so those clashes more and more common.
Right.
But this cultural unconscious, it's not some abstract, heady thing. It's something we can see in action all over the place.
So where do we spot it? Where do we look?
Well, traditional art, that's a good start. It's packed with symbols, motifs, reflecting those deep cultural values, beliefs.
Okay.
Think those intricate patterns you see in Islamic art, or the powerful symbolism in indigenous Australian dot paintings. They're not just pretty, they're windows into a culture's soul.
So like they're giving us this visual representation of the cultural unconscious.
Precisely. And it's not just art. Rituals, those are another big expression. Think of, I don't know, festivals, Diwali, Carnival.
Yeah.
On the surface, they're fun celebrations, right? But they often have these roots in ancient traditions, carry this deep symbolic meaning, connects people to their heritage.
Even if we don't like consciously understand every bit of symbolism, we can still feel that connection, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of unconscious connections, ever notice how some idioms or proverbs, they click within a culture,
Oh yeah.
even if they sound kind of weird to outsiders? That's the cultural unconscious at work,
Right.
shaping how we use language, how we see the world.
Like how, I don't know, in America we say like spill beans instead of just tell me.
Yeah, right.
Like it implies this whole attitude towards secrecy and gossip.
Exactly. Language isn't just conveying info, it's transmitting like a whole set of assumptions, values, all that cultural stuff. It's not just the idioms, even our word choices, sense of humor, how we structure sentences. It's all subtly influenced by the cultural unconscious, like a hidden code, We're always sending and receiving it without even realizing it.
Whoa, this is making me think about how I taught. It's like we're all speaking in code, and this cultural unconscious, it's the key to crack it.
That's a great analogy. And it goes even deeper, like dreams can be a window into our personal unconscious.
Yeah, like how our anxieties, our desires, they pop up in dream imagery, right?
Well, research suggests that dreams, they can also give us glimpses into the cultural unconscious, recurring themes, symbols in dreams, the ones that are widespread.
Mm.
Those can point to, like, anxieties, aspirations, even, traumas within a whole group.
So it's not that everyone's having the same dream, but there are these common threads that reflect like the, I don't know, the cultural anxieties of a certain group.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. So we've got art, rituals, language, even dreams reflecting this cultural unconscious. It really is everywhere, huh?
It really is, yeah. It shapes how we deal with the world constantly.
This reminds me of something you said earlier about the cultural unconscious being this bridge between, Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, those big archetypes, right, and our individual experiences. Can you unpack that a little more?
Sure, sure. Remember, collective unconscious, that's about those universal figures, the hero, the mother, the trickster. But it's the cultural unconscious that gives them, like, their specific flavor.
Okay, so the hero archetype, that might be universal, but how that hero is shown, their values, their struggles, that's where the cultural unconscious kicks in.
Precisely. Think about the wise old man archetype, right?
Right.
In the West, he might be a wizard, like Merlin, all mystery, magic.
Mm.
But in Eastern traditions, he might be a Zen master, emphasizing wisdom through, I don't know, simplicity, mindfulness.
Right, right.
Same archetype, totally different cultural expression.
So we're all drawing from the same, well, same archetypes, but this cultural unconscious, it's like a filter, shaping how they're understood, experienced within a group.
Exactly. And that's what gives it so much power. It connects us to something bigger than ourselves, but also shapes our own, unique cultural identity.
This is blowing my mind. We've covered a lot from where the cultural unconscious comes from to how it shows up in everything, art to dreams. But I gotta ask, why does this all matter? What's the real world, significance of understanding this? What does it all mean?
That's the big question, isn't it? Understanding this is not just intellectual curiosity. It's got huge implications for how we live in the world.
Okay, I'm ready for the deep dive. Tell me more.
Well, for starters, it's huge in fields like psychology. Therapists working with people from different backgrounds, they got to understand their clients' cultural unconscious to really help give effective treatment.
Because what might be a healthy coping mechanism in one culture could be seen as, I don't know, problematic in another.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it's not just therapy, the cultural unconscious. It's key for understanding how societies work, period. Informs how we see social structures, political movements, even, economic trends. Central to fields like anthropology, sociology.
So if you're trying to figure out why a group acts a certain way, you can't ignore their cultural unconscious, right?
Exactly. And it's not just about understanding other cultures, it's about understanding our own culture too. By being aware of our own cultural backpack, we can start questioning our assumptions, challenging our biases, and making better choices about how we want to be in the world.
So it's like holding up a mirror to our own culture and asking, where'd these beliefs come from? Are they even helping us? And if not, how do we change them?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And that's where things get really interesting and maybe a little uncomfortable.
Oh, I sense a plot twist coming. What's the catch?
Well, the cultural unconscious, it can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it gives you that belonging, shared history, like a framework for how to see the world.
Okay.
But on the other hand, it can lead to clashes, misunderstandings, even conflict.
So it's not all sunshine and roses.
Unfortunately, no. When different cultural backpacks, they collide, things can get messy. Think about conflicts that come from different views on, I don't know, gender roles, religious beliefs, even just how to be a parent. Those values, they're deep down, often rooted in the cultural unconscious, and man, they can be hard to bridge.
So it's like two different operating systems trying to run on the same computer.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And in a globalized world where those operating systems are like always bumping into each other, it's no wonder we see so much conflict, so much misunderstanding.
Yeah.
But it's not just clashes between cultures, the cultural unconscious. It can also create tension within a single culture, too.
Oh, so I thought it was all about, shared values, belonging.
It is, ideally. But cultures change, right? And sometimes in individuals or whole groups, they find themselves, I don't know, at odds with the main, like the dominant cultural story.
So it's like your backpack, it's suddenly out of fashion, or it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't fit your needs anymore.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. And this can happen for a lot of reasons. Maybe you move to a new city, totally different culture. Maybe you went through something personally that put you, I don't know, at odds with how you were raised. Or maybe you're part of a group that's, marginalized and their values, experiences, they haven't been reflected in the main culture.
So you feel that tension between how you've grown and the weight of like your cultural inheritance. Sounds like a recipe for, I don't know, inner conflict.
It can be, yeah. And navigating that tension, that's one of the hardest parts of being human.
Okay, so we've said the cultural unconscious is powerful, complex, and not always a force for, for good. But I'm still stuck on how it can create conflict within one culture. Can you give me like a concrete example?
Absolutely. Think about all the debates around gender roles.
Hmm.
In a lot of Western societies, you've got these deep-seated cultural narratives about masculinity, femininity.
Right.
They're bumping up against, well, changing social norms, how individuals express themselves.
So it's like the old script for how men and women should act is being challenged
Right,
with.
exactly. And that challenge, that can create a ton of tension, anxiety, both for people trying to figure out those shifting expectations and for society as a whole, as it grapples with redefining those old norms.
Whoa, it's like watching a cultural earthquake in slow motion,
Mm.
like as those beliefs start to crack and shift.
That's a powerful image. And it reminds us the cultural unconscious is not frozen in time. It's always evolving, responding to pressures from inside and outside.
This is making me think about how globalization is impacting all this. Is it making like a more homogenized global culture, or are those local cultures finding ways to resist that pressure? And what does that even mean for, I don't know, the future of our identities, both individually and like collectively?
Those are the big questions. And they're exactly what we're going to be diving into in the next part of our deep
Oh,
dive.
I can't wait to unpack this more. This is getting really good. Okay, so before we took a break there, we were getting into some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Cultural clashes, norms changing, the whole globalization question. It kind of feels like we're standing on, I don't know, shifting ground.
It's true, yeah. The cultural
Yeah.
conscious, it's always in motion, adapting to new realities, new challenges.
Right.
But let's zoom out for a second. Think about globalization, on the big scale.
Hmm.
Is it making this like bland monoculture where everyone's, I don't know, wearing the same metaphorical jeans, listening to the same playlist?
It's valid worry, right? We're all getting hit with the same global trends through media, internet, all that. Does that flatten out our individual cultures?
It's a powerful force,
Hmm.
for sure. But I think it's more complicated than just I don't know, a cultural steamroller.
Okay.
Local cultures, they're tough, they're resilient. They find ways to kind of absorb those outside influences, but adapt them to their own unique contexts. Think about how something like, I don't know, pizza, a classic Italian dish,
Right, right.
it's been reinterpreted all over the world.
Yeah, so it's not just about one culture dominating, but more like a conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Give and take, both sides.
Yeah.
And those conversations, they can lead to some pretty cool, like hybrid forms. Take music, for example.
Okay.
You got genres like Afrobeat, blends West African musical traditions with, I don't know, jazz, funk,
Right.
make something totally new.
So globalization isn't like erasing the differences, but maybe it's blurring the lines, making new possibilities.
That's a great way to put it. It's like this cultural remix. Different influences get blended up, create something unique, vibrant. And I think that's a good thing. Ultimately,
Yeah.
expands our horizons, exposes us to new ways of thinking, new ways of being.
Okay, so we've been talking about this cultural unconscious on this huge global scale,
Right.
but I'm also wondering about like the impact on a smaller level, like within families, personal relationships.
That's crucial, yeah. Often that's where those unconscious patterns they first take root.
Right.
We're not born blank slates. Our families, our communities, they pass on this whole set of values, beliefs, even expectations that aren't, explicitly said, their own version of the cultural unconscious.
So it's like we get this starter pack of cultural norms from our families even before we're old enough to like question them.
Precisely. And those early influences, man, they can be powerful. They shape how we see ourselves, how we relate to others, even how we, I don't know, make decisions. Think about how different families might see something like financial responsibility.
Okay.
Some might emphasize, saving, delayed gratification, while others might be all about, I don't know, generosity, sharing resources.
So even our attitude towards money, something we often think of as like personal, is actually shaped by those early influences.
Totally. And it goes beyond money. Think about communication styles.
Right.
In some families, being direct, assertive, that's valued. Others, it's all about being indirect, keeping the harmony. Those patterns, they often get passed on without anyone saying anything, just through everyday interactions and unspoken expectations.
This makes me think about how some families are like really emotionally expressive
Yeah.
while others are more, reserved. Those patterns, they feel so natural, but they're learned, aren't they?
Exactly. And those differences, they can cause misunderstandings, especially when people from, different family backgrounds are interacting.
Mm.
What one person might see as rude, insensitive, another person, it's totally normal to them.
It's like speaking different emotional languages almost.
That's a great way to put it. And being aware of those different dialects, that can be super helpful in relationships,
Yeah, yeah.
especially romantic ones.
Okay, so let's talk about love. How does this cultural unconscious play out in romantic relationships?
Well, think about all the unspoken expectations we bring in,
Right.
our beliefs about gender roles, communication styles, how we show affection, even how we deal with conflict. It's
Right.
all shaped by where we come from culturally, often without us even, realizing it.
So even if we think we're being all modern, breaking free from those traditional roles, our cultural unconscious might still be like pulling the strings.
It can, yeah, it can have a strong influence. And this can be especially tricky in intercultural relationships where the partners, they come from different backgrounds, different sets of those unwritten rules.
Like what might be a romantic gesture in one culture could be seen as, I don't know, totally inappropriate in another.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just imagining all these like hilarious and awkward misunderstandings.
It happens. And it's not just about, romantic gestures. It's
Yeah.
about everything. How you show affection, how you handle money, how you approach being a parent.
Right.
Those deep down values, they can cause friction if they're not, acknowledged, talked about.
Makes me think about different cultural views on, I don't know, PDA public displays of affection. What might be seen as sweet in one culture could be, I don't know, over the top, even offensive in another.
Perfect example. Highlights how important communication is and cultural sensitivity.
Yeah.
It's not about erasing differences. It's about understanding them, respecting them. When couples are willing to do that, intercultural relationships, they can be really, really enriching.
It's like learning to appreciate a different kind of love language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that appreciation can lead to personal growth, a deeper understanding of yourself and your partner. But the cultural unconscious, it doesn't just impact our personal lives. It shapes the environments we navigate, like the workplace.
So we're taking this beyond the dinner table into the boardroom. Tell me more.
Think about it. Different organizations, they have their own unique cultures, their own sets of values, norms, how they communicate. Some workplaces, they're really formal, hierarchical. Others are more relaxed, collaborative.
Well, it's like some companies are stuck in like a 1950s model, top-down authority. Others are more about, I don't know, flat structures, teamwork.
Exactly. And those cultural differences, they can have a huge impact on everything. Employee morale, productivity, how innovative they are.
So understanding the cultural unconscious of a workplace, that can be key to success, like knowing the unspoken rules of the game.
Exactly. It's about reading between the lines, seeing the power dynamics, and, adapting how you communicate to fit the culture. It's like learning a new language, but instead of words, you're decoding behaviors, unspoken expectations.
So it's not just what you say, but how you say it, when you say it, and undoubtedly who you say it to.
Exactly. And this applies not just to, workplaces, but to any group we're part of.
Mm.
Our neighborhoods, our online communities, the social movements we support. Each of those spaces has its own, unique cultural tapestry, woven from shared experiences, values, all those unspoken rules.
So basically, the cultural unconscious, it's like this invisible force field around us wherever we go.
You got it. It's the air we breathe, the water we swim in. It shapes how we see things, influences our interactions, and it really defines what it means to be part of a particular group.
Wow, this is giving me a whole new appreciation for how complex human interactions really are. It's like we're all walking around with these intricate cultural maps in our heads, trying to navigate a world where those maps don't always, line up.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And recognizing that we're all operating from different maps, different landmarks, different points of reference.
Right.
That's the first step towards, I don't know, greater understanding, more empathy.
This has been an incredible journey so far. We've explored, where the cultural unconscious comes from, how it shows up in different places, even how it can lead to conflict. But before we wrap up here, I want to go back to something you said earlier
Uh,
about how we're not just, passively receiving our culture, that we can actually shape it.
that's right, yeah. And it's important to emphasize that.
Hmm.
While the cultural unconscious can feel like this big external force,
Right.
it's ultimately something humans created. And what humans create, they can change.
Okay, this is getting exciting. So we're not just stuck with the cultural baggage we inherited. We can actually unpack it, sort through it, and decide what we want to keep, what we want to leave behind.
Exactly. And we can even add new stuff to that backpack. New values, new narratives, new ways of being. It's a process of, I don't know, conscious evolution,
Yeah.
both individually and as a whole.
So how do we do that? Where do we even begin to shift something that feels so ingrained, so pervasive?
That's what we're going to be exploring in the final part of our deep dives. Buckle up, because things are about to get really interesting.
Oh, I can't wait. All right, we're back, and my brain is like buzzing. We've been talking about how this cultural unconscious shapes us, but now we're getting into like how WE can shape IT.
Yeah.
It feels, I don't know, almost revolutionary, like realizing we've got more agency than we thought.
It is empowering, isn't it? We're not just, passively inheriting this cultural backpack. We can unpack it, question it, and really decide what we want to carry forward.
But I'm also thinking about the HOW, you know? Culture feels like this like massive ship moving so slow. How do we even start turning it in a new direction?
That's where understanding those sources of the cultural unconscious, that comes in handy. Remember, myth, religion, history, art,
Right.
these are all like avenues for change.
Okay.
If we want to rewrite the cultural narrative, we got to start with the stories we tell ourselves.
So, like, if we've been telling ourselves this myth about, I don't know, individual grit being the only way to succeed,
Yeah.
we need to start telling new stories that acknowledge those systemic barriers, the importance of, like, community support.
Exactly. And it's not just changing the story, it's changing the medium.
Yeah.
Art, that's powerful stuff.
Mhm.
It bypasses our logical mind, speaks straight to our emotions. Think about how, I don't know, protest music has been used to fuel social movements, civil rights, anti-war protests.
Right, right.
Those songs, they tapped into that collective energy of the cultural unconscious, helps shift the whole conversation.
This makes me think about, like, the role of artists, creators. Yeah.
It's not just about making something pretty or entertaining, it's about shaping culture.
Right.
That's a huge responsibility.
It is. They're like cultural architects, shaping the spaces we live in, both physically and mentally. And that's not just artists with a capital A either. We can all be cultural creators in our own ways.
Mhm.
Every time we challenge a stereotype, speak out against injustice, or even just, I don't know, live our lives in a way that lines up with our values, we're adding to a new cultural landscape.
So even small everyday things can have a ripple effect.
Yeah.
It's encouraging to think we're not powerless against these huge cultural forces.
Absolutely. Change comes from the top down, AD the bottom up.
Right.
And sometimes those little acts of, I don't know, courage, defiance, those can be the seeds that spark a bigger cultural transformation.
Okay, so we've got those individual actions, the ripples we can create.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering about, like, bigger institutions, education, government, media.
Mm.
Can they play a role in shifting the cultural unconscious? Oh, they absolutely can. Think about education. If we want a more, just and equitable world, we got to start by teaching critical thinking skills, fostering empathy, exposing students to different perspectives. It's about giving them the tools to question those narratives they inherited, to imagine new possibilities.
So it's about like empowering that next generation to become those conscious cultural creators.
Exactly. And it's not just education. Government policies, they can promote inclusion, break down those systemic barriers. And the media, well, they're often part of the problem, but they can also be a big force for positive change.
Right?
It's about challenging those harmful stereotypes, highlighting diverse voices, creating a more, nuanced and accurate reflection of the world.
This is making me feel hopeful. Like, it's not easy, but we've got tools to shape a better future
Yeah.
for ourselves and for the generations coming after us.
That's the spirit. We're not just passengers on this cultural journey. We're co-creators.
Hmm.
And we've got a responsibility to steer the ship in a direction that benefits all of humanity.
I love that analogy. We're all in this boat together, so we might as well grab an oar and start rowing.
Exactly. And it's
Yeah.
not just about rowing in the same direction. It's about recognizing There are lots of ways to navigate, lots of cultural perspectives that make the journey, I don't know, richer.
So it's about respecting those differences, learning from each other, finding ways to collaborate.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's where understanding the cultural unconscious, that's key. It's not just about seeing the differences, it's about understanding those deeper, motivations, fears, aspirations, the stuff that drives them. It's about seeing the world through multiple lenses, appreciating how complex human experience is, and finding that common ground, even when there are differences.
It's like we've been given this incredible toolbox,
Yeah.
all these insights into how culture works, and now it's up to us to use them wisely, to build bridges, to dismantle those harmful structures, and to create a world that's, I don't know, more just, more compassionate, more fulfilling for everyone.
Beautifully said. And I think that's a perfect place to wrap up. We've explored the power of the cultural unconscious, its origins, how it shows up, the challenges, and ultimately its potential.
Right.
It's a force that can divide us, but it can also bring us together. It can limit how we see things, but it can also expand our views and keep us stuck in the past, but it can also push us towards a more conscious and equitable future.
What an amazing, amazing journey this has been. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of myself, my culture, and the world.
It's been a pleasure sharing this with you. And to our listeners, I encourage you to keep this conversation going. Examine your own cultural backpacks. Question those assumptions and think about how you can contribute to a more conscious and compassionate world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the cultural unconscious. Until next time, keep exploring.